The alien world burned, skies filled with smoke and falling fire as the invaders tightened their grip. Cities that once shone with light and proud towers now lay in ruin, streets cracked and split, and people ran with nothing but the clothes on their backs. The air was thick with ash and the smell of melted stone. Children cried in voices too small against the roar of collapsing buildings. Soldiers fought desperately at the edges of the capital, but every defense line fell one after the other. The invaders came in endless waves, their war machines moving like shadows, their weapons carving holes through shields as if they were made of paper. The defenders had fought bravely, their fleets in orbit had tried to stand, but the sky was now filled with wreckage, their ships scattered like broken glass across the upper atmosphere, and the ground forces that remained knew the truth. This was not a battle, it was an ending. Inside the council chamber, smoke crept along the ceilings as leaders shouted over one another, voices cracked with fear, eyes filled with despair. Maps of the planet glowed red as city after city was marked lost. One elder pounded his fist against the table, shouting that they could still rally, that they could still win if they did not give up, but no one listened, because every ear could hear the screams outside the chamber. Every wall shook with the thunder of another block falling. At last the High Chancellor stood. Her face streaked with soot, her voice hoarse. She said only one thing: send it, send the call. Her words fell heavy into the chamber. Silence followed, not because they disagreed, but because they all understood what it meant. To send the signal was to admit they could no longer save themselves. It was to place their fate in hands unknown. But there was no choice left. The technicians moved quickly, rushing to the communications tower buried deep under the council hall, wires sparking, panels flickering. The officer at the console trembled as he activated the ancient deep space array, its great dishes hidden under the polar ice, machines older than living memory, designed not for war but for desperate pleas such as this. His fingers hovered above the keys. He thought of his family in the western city that had already fallen. He thought of the faces of the refugees who had poured into the capital, and he pressed the button. The console hummed as the message took shape. The words simple, stripped of all pride. This is Karos, we are under attack, our defenses have failed, we require aid, please respond. The officer set it to repeat, looping endlessly into the void. Every frequency their machines could touch carried the cry, up past the ruined orbit, through the scattered bones of their fleet, into the endless dark, outside the city. The invaders pushed closer, black machines walking over fire like demons risen from nightmares. Each step shook the ground, each blast tore apart more stone. Still the defenders fired their weapons, rifles glowing, cannons barking, but for every machine destroyed, 3 more appeared from the haze. The streets filled with screams and the sound of metal tearing, and yet above it all, the signal flew, silent and small, unseen by those who fought, but brighter than hope to those who sent it. The High Chancellor stood over the officer's shoulder, watching the console lights blink. She asked softly, "Will anyone hear?" And the officer did not answer. Because he could not. His throat was dry, his heart heavy, but in his mind he imagined the signal crossing stars, moving through dust clouds and ancient silence. He imagined it finding someone, anyone, who might still care. The night dragged on, bombs fell, fires grew, the capital screamed, but the console kept sending. The technicians guarded it as if it were the last beating heart of their people. Some prayed, some cursed, some simply watched the skies. And though no reply came, they clung to the idea that their voice now lived beyond their world, that somewhere in the great dark a listener might pause, might turn, might come. In the council chamber the leaders sat in silence, listening to the hum of the broadcast. The High Chancellor whispered, "Even if no one answers, at least the stars will remember we tried." But deep inside, in the fragile part of their hearts that refused to die, they hoped, they prayed, they begged that someone would hear. Because their world was ending, and only the unknown could save them. Now the SOS sped into the endless dark, a fragile voice against the roar of the galaxy. Yet on the ground the war did not pause. The invaders pressed harder, their black machines crawling over the burning ruins like a tide of iron. Every blast shook the city until the streets cracked and swallowed whole blocks. The defenders fought still, rifles glowing with heat, hands shaking from exhaustion, but their lines broke again and again. Every soldier knew they could not hold, still they fought. Because surrender meant nothing but death. In the control chamber the console pulsed with its repeating call, its lights blinking like the last heartbeat of a dying body. The officer leaned close, his eyes bloodshot. his fingers trembling as he adjusted the frequency to make sure the signal remained steady. He whispered the words in his mind, not as duty, but as prayer. Please hear us. Please come. No reply came. Only static when he switched to receivers. The Chancellor sat slumped against the wall, her robes torn, her eyes red from smoke. She stared at the ceiling where dust drifted down with every tremor. She knew the truth. If no one answered, their people were finished. Outside, civilians poured into the underground shelters. Thousands crammed into tunnels meant for hundreds. The air grew heavy, thick with sweat and fear. Mothers clutched children close, elders coughed into cloths, and every time the ground rumbled with an explosion above, the crowd fell into sharp silence, then rose into whispers again. They all knew of the signal. Word had spread like fire. Every refugee asked the same question. Will anyone hear? And no one could answer. In the broken streets, the last armored convoy tried to push the invaders back from the southern gates. Tanks belched smoke and fire, their cannons shaking the ground. But black invader craft descended from the sky and cut them open with beams of light. One by one the tanks exploded, flames reaching the clouds. The soldiers inside never even screamed. In the chamber the officer's console flickered, his breath caught. For one small second the static had shifted. Not silence, not their own echo, but something different, something heavy. He pressed his ear close, twisting knobs, begging for clarity. But the noise fell away, leaving only emptiness again. His heart sank. But the Chancellor leaned forward. Did you hear it? Her voice cracked like breaking glass. He nodded but said nothing, because hope hurt more than despair. Outside, the capital cracked apart. A great tower that had once touched the sky now leaned sideways, splitting in the middle, crashing down with a roar that deafened the city. Ash and fire covered everything. The officer's console rattled with the shock, yet still it blinked, still it sent. Its steady hum the only thing that did not break. In that moment, as the world itself seemed to tear in half, the survivors realized what they had done. They had cast their fate into the void, into the hands of strangers, and they had no choice now but to wait. Every hour that passed without reply felt longer than a lifetime. The invaders drew closer to the council district, their machines cutting through walls as if they were cloth, their beams slicing the sky into burning stripes. The defenders fell back into the inner streets, faces streaked with soot and fear. One soldier, blood dripping down his arm, muttered to another, "If no one comes, at least the stars will carry our cry." But the other only shook his head, his eyes empty. The officer looked once more at his screen, his lips moving silently, praying to gods he never believed in before, praying to stars that might never listen. Above them all, the signal traveled, unseen, unheard, a lonely cry slicing through the cold dark, carrying the weight of an entire world's final hope. And though the people of Kairos could not know it yet, far away, something had heard far away from the burning streets of Kairos, in the black silence between stars. The desperate SOS traveled, bouncing past dead satellites, slipping through dust clouds, and cutting across the endless dark until it found ears not meant for mercy. On Earth, deep beneath layers of metal and rock, human arrays woke with sudden life. Vast dishes turned with slow power, and signals blinked red across secure consoles. Operators in black uniforms leaned forward, their eyes narrowing. The words of the alien plea spilled across their screens, broken by interference but clear enough to carry the message of desperation. "This is Kairos. We are under attack. Our defenses have failed. We require aid. Please respond." The room grew silent as the words repeated, again and again, like a dying heart refusing to stop. One young operator swallowed hard and whispered, "They're begging." The duty officer beside him said nothing, his jaw clenched. He only forwarded the message up the chain, deep into the hidden heart of Earth's war council, in a command chamber far larger, far colder. Leaders of humanity gathered as the message was played, their faces hard as stone. None showed pity, none softened. They had heard such cries before, and they knew what it meant. One admiral stood, tall, her eyes like steel. She said, "The Deathworlders have been summoned." The others nodded in grim silence. They did not question if they should go. They only calculated how. Outside Earth's orbit, shipyards lit the sky, vast hulks of steel woke from silence, their engines rumbling with thunder that carried even in vacuum. Dreadnoughts long hidden in shadow powered up, their spines glowing with pale blue fire. Destroyers undocked from orbital rings. Carriers yawned open like hungry beasts releasing their fleets. Humanity's armada was not a thing of beauty. It was a thing of terror, black hulls bristling with weapons, armor scarred from wars fought long ago. Every ship looked like a wound given shape. The galaxy called them Deathworlders, not out of insult, but out of fear. For humans had risen from a world that killed without mercy, storms that could flatten mountains, beasts with teeth of stone, fire and ice that never forgave weakness, and from that world had come these ships, these soldiers, these storms dressed as men. The Admiral's voice carried through the channels. Mobilize all fleets within strike range. Target system locked, Karos Prime, emergency designation, response level. Total war. The words rolled like thunder, and humanity obeyed. Across the system engines roared. Warships moved in tight formation. Soldiers boarded transports in silence, their faces unreadable behind mirrored visors. They did not ask why. They did not ask who. They only prepared, rifles loaded, armor sealed. Orders burned into their minds like fire. The cry of Karos had been heard. But what was coming was not the gentle hand of rescue. It was the iron fist of fury, back on Earth. Whispers spread among those who monitored the signal. Whispers of the alien plea. Some asked if these strangers deserved such power brought upon their soil. Others muttered that humanity never answered without reason. That when they moved as storms. In the cold command chamber, the Admiral simply stared at the screen where the alien words repeated. Her face cold, her voice colder. She said, "They called, and now they will learn what it means when Deathworlders answer." Far above Karos, the invaders tightened their hold, unaware that in the endless dark, a fleet was already on its way. A fleet born of storms. And sharpened by fury, moving with the weight of a world that had never known mercy. The people of Karos prayed someone would hear, and someone had. But the answer they had called for was not salvation. It was war, and war was coming. Above the ruined skies of Karos, the invaders celebrated their victory. Their fleets circled the broken world like vultures around a corpse. Beams of light cut into the last defense towers until they fell silent. And on the ground their war machines stomped. Through smoke and ash, crushing streets beneath legs of black steel. But far across the void, the silence of space trembled as something stirred. The human fleet had moved, faster than most species believed possible. Their engines burning with a blue fury that bent the darkness around them. Dreadnoughts as vast as cities sailed in formation. Carriers opened their armored bellies to reveal wings of strike craft waiting like hawks. Destroyers flanked them with blades of steel and light. Every hull was black as night, scarred by wars long past, yet stronger for it. They were not a fleet meant to be seen as saviors. They were a fleet built to be feared. In the Admiral's command ship, the bridge pulsed with quiet power. Men and women in dark uniforms moved with silence, their mirrored visors hiding their eyes, their hands steady as stone. The Admiral stood at the center, her gaze locked on the growing image of Karos on the screens. The alien plea still echoed through comms, a desperate chant that had not stopped since it was sent. "We are under attack, our defenses have failed, we require aid." Her lips curled, not in pity, but in grim certainty. She said only one word, "Engage," and the fleet obeyed. In the darkness before arrival, whispers spread across other alien networks, countless worlds monitoring signals. They too had heard the SOS, and now they saw movement. They saw the Deathworlders rising. The whispers grew into fear. Old legends returned, stories told to frightened children now spoken by trembling leaders. Humans do not come in peace, humans do not come with mercy, they come as storms. And for the first time in generations, entire civilizations shivered at the thought of Earth's armada moving in war. Back on Karos, the officer at the console still watched his signal blink, his chest hollow with despair. No reply had come. His people were dying. The capital was moments from falling. But then the static shifted, the console lit with a tremor of sound unlike before. Not weak, not broken, but sharp and strong. He froze, his hands trembling as the translator tried to catch the words. Lines of harsh human script appeared. Message received, coordinates locked, fleet en route. His breath caught, he shouted to the Chancellor, "They heard us. They are coming." Hope rippled through the chamber like fire across dry grass. Some cried, some laughed, others prayed harder. But outside the war still burned. Invaders breaking through the last barricades, dragging civilians from shelters, executing soldiers in the open streets. No one in the city could yet see what moved above their sky. But the universe could. The Deathworlder fleet slipped into the system, engines flaring, weapons charged, dreadnoughts spreading wide like wings across the void. The invader fleets orbiting Karos turned their sensors. Alarms screamed through their decks, commanders barked orders, panic crawling into their voices, because on their screens appeared shapes they had only seen in nightmare reports. Black hulls of Earth. Moving fast, moving certain, carrying war in every line of steel. The officer in the chamber whispered the words again and again, almost in disbelief. They are coming, and above, the night began to change. The stars bending as something vast entered orbit, something older, stronger, and far more terrible than the invaders had ever faced. The cry for help had been answered. But the answer was not gentle. It was a fleet of Deathworlders, and their arrival would turn the war into fire. The first sign was not light but silence. The invader ships that had circled Karos with arrogant ease suddenly cut their transmissions, their chatter turning to confused bursts, their formations breaking like startled birds. Civilians on the ground looked upward through the haze and saw shadows moving across the burning sky. Vast shapes blotting out the stars, shapes too large, too steady, to belong to the invaders. The officer in the command chamber stared at his console as new signals erupted, strong, precise, unlike anything he had ever seen. The translator spat out only 3 words, Deathworlders entering orbit, and his blood turned cold. Outside, the heavens split open, human dreadnoughts tore through the atmosphere's edge, their hulls glowing faint blue as their engines pushed against gravity with effortless power. Each ship was so massive that the ruins below seemed like children's toys in their shadow. Behind them carriers released wings of smaller craft that fanned out in formation like razor birds, while destroyers slid to the flanks, bristling with weapons that hummed with restrained violence. The invaders panicked. Their warships scrambled to form lines. Their ground commanders barked orders for their machines to push deeper into the capital, as if hiding behind hostages could save them. But the humans did not hesitate. Their first strike came like the wrath of a god. A single beam of white fire lanced from a dreadnought and carved through the lead invader cruiser, splitting it in half before the enemy even fired a shot. The wreck spun into the atmosphere, breaking apart into burning fragments that rained down across the horizon. The ground shook with the impact. Civilians screamed, some in terror, some in awe. In the control chamber the officer whispered, "They are here. They are real." But the Chancellor's eyes were wide with something darker than hope. She knew legends. She knew the stories of the Deathworlders. And she said quietly, "They came, but not as saviors." Outside, the sky became a battlefield. Human warships moved with impossible speed, every strike clean, every shot precise. Invader fleets collapsed in minutes, their proud formations scattered into debris fields. On the ground the spidery machines that had haunted the streets turned their weapons upward, firing into the heavens. Their beams lit the night like desperate fireworks, but the Deathworlder fleet did not flinch. Their shields absorbed the strikes like raindrops on stone, then answered with thunder. Explosions rolled across the city. Invader walkers toppled, torn apart from above. Survivors hiding in shelters felt the ground shake as enemy machines fell. And when they crawled out, they saw the impossible sight of human fire raining down, not upon them, but upon those who had hunted them. Still, the humans gave no word of comfort, no message of peace, only war. Their silence was louder than any promise. The officer clutched the edge of his console, torn between joy and dread, for though their people had been saved from certain death, he could not shake the thought echoing in the back of his mind. What kind of power answers a cry for help with such fury, and what price would his world pay for summoning it? The sky above Karos was no longer the same. It had become a wall of fire and shadows. Human dreadnoughts hovered like mountains of steel, their weapons blazing with every passing second. Invader fleets that once seemed endless now broke apart, scattering like insects before a storm. Pieces of shattered hulls fell in burning trails, streaking across the atmosphere until they slammed into the ground with deafening impact. The people hiding in shelters trembled, not from the invaders anymore, but from the sheer power shaking the earth. In the command chamber the officer stared at the live feeds, his hands gripping the console so tight his knuckles turned pale. Everywhere he looked, human firepower was tearing through. The enemy, precise, merciless, unstoppable. The invaders had turned their walkers toward the city, hoping to use civilians as shields, but the Deathworlders did not hesitate. Strike craft screamed through the clouds, dropping streams of energy fire that tore the machines to pieces in seconds. Explosions rolled through the streets, glass shattered, walls cracked, and yet the human attacks never touched the huddled civilians. Every blast was calculated with terrifying precision. The defenders of Kairos, broken and scattered, watched in stunned silence as their greatest enemy was undone before their eyes. Some cheered, some cried, but many simply froze, unable to believe what they were seeing. The invaders that had crushed their armies were now running, fleeing back to their dropships, trying desperately to reach orbit. But the fleet above allowed none to escape. Destroyers moved in tight lines, cutting down fleeing ships before they even cleared the clouds. The admiral aboard the human flagship stood like a statue, her face unreadable, her voice cold as she gave a single order: eliminate resistance, no survivors, and the fleet obeyed without hesitation. On the ground, the first human drop pods slammed into the streets, each impact cracking stone and sending dust clouds billowing high. When the smoke cleared, black armored soldiers emerged, towering, faceless, moving with mechanical precision. They fanned out through the ruins, their weapons humming, their mirrored visors reflecting only fire. They did not speak to the civilians who cowered at their presence. They did not stop to comfort those sobbing in the rubble. They moved forward, hunting. The last of the invaders, every step echoing like a drumbeat of war. The officer felt his chest tighten. This was salvation. Yes, but it was not the salvation of friends. It was the salvation of storms. The Chancellor's voice was low, steady, but heavy with truth. They fight for their own reasons, not for us. Outside, a young boy ran from the shelter, reaching out as a squad passed, his small hand lifted as if begging for safety. The nearest soldier did not pause, did not bend, only stepped around him and kept walking, his mirrored visor catching the child's reflection like a ghost. The boy was pulled back by his mother, and together they hid in silence. The officer turned his eyes from the feed, unable to watch, yet unable to deny. The invaders were finished, their machines toppled, their ships erased, but the presence of the Deathworlders was heavier than victory, heavier than fear itself, and in that moment every survivor understood. The battle for Kairos had ended, but the judgment of Earth had only just begun. The battle was over, yet the air still shook with thunder. Smoke coiled through every broken street, ash drifted down like grey snow, and above it all the human fleet held its place, black and silent against the stars. Their dreadnoughts casting shadows so vast the ruins seemed to vanish beneath them. On the ground their soldiers moved through the city in silent lines, sweeping every district with the same precision they had shown in war. They stepped over rubble and fire without pause, their mirrored visors reflecting only emptiness. They offered no words to the civilians who cowered in doorways, no nod to the wounded who reached out from the rubble. They marched on as if the people were not there at all. In the command chamber the officer's console flickered with new messages from the human flagship, each one cold and precise. Enemy eliminated, occupation secured, population assessment pending. He read the words aloud and felt his stomach twist. Occupation, assessment. These were not the words of saviors. The Chancellor stood stiff at the shattered window, her eyes on the giant shapes above, her voice low and steady. They are measuring us, deciding what we are worth. The officer swallowed hard, because he knew she was right. The civilians began to crawl out of shelters, blinking into the red glow of fires still burning. Some fell to their knees in gratitude. Others raised their hands in surrender though no weapon was pointed at them. A few shouted thanks into the smoky air, but the Deathworlders never replied. Their silence was more terrible than any answer. In the southern quarter a squad of humans passed through a street where children huddled against a cracked wall. One child stumbled forward, clutching a ragged toy, his small voice whispering please. The squad did not slow. Their boots thundered past, leaving the child trembling in their wake. The mother pulled him back, her face pale with terror. In the chamber the officer clenched his fists, torn between awe and dread. He could not deny they had been saved, but he also knew something darker. This was not a rescue. This was judgment in armor. The console pulsed again. A new message burned across the screen in letters so sharp they seemed carved from steel. Maintain position, judgment incomplete. The officer's breath caught. The Chancellor closed her eyes for a long moment, then spoke. Their war is done, but ours is not, for we do not yet know if they will. Let us live. Her words filled the chamber with silence heavier than any bomb. Outside the dreadnoughts shifted slightly, their engines glowing with restrained fire, and every soul in Kairos understood. The Deathworlders had come, they had answered, but whether they had come as saviors or executioners, that truth had not yet been decided. The night over Kairos was broken, not by stars but by the shadows of human dreadnoughts, their vast hulls blocking out the heavens, their engines glowing faintly. Like the eyes of beasts waiting to strike, the fires of the ruined capital still burned, but the true weight pressing down on every survivor was not the smoke, not the rubble, but the silent presence above. The invaders were gone, their fleets scattered into ash, their war machines toppled and left smoking in the streets, but the Deathworlders did not leave. They did not celebrate victory. They lingered, motionless, patient, watching. On the ground their soldiers moved through the ruins in formation, black-armored, faceless, their mirrored visors reflecting only flames. Every step they took was slow, deliberate, echoing like a heartbeat through the broken city. They spoke no words, offered no gestures of comfort. They marched past civilians as if they were shadows, only turning when they sensed the last traces of the invaders, hunting them down with mechanical precision. Civilians crawled from their shelters, blinking into the ruined streets. Some cried in relief, others fell to their knees in prayer. A few even dared to call out thanks, but no reply came. The humans neither acknowledged nor dismissed them. They were like storms moving on their own path. In the command chamber the officer's console flickered with new transmissions from the flagship. Cold lines of text that filled the room with dread. Population review in progress. Compliance recommended, judgment pending. The officer read the words aloud, his voice shaking, and the silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. The Chancellor did not flinch. She whispered, "They are deciding, not if we are free, but if we deserve to remain at all." The officer's throat tightened. He wanted to argue, but when he looked out the shattered window and saw the colossal shapes above, his words died. In the southern quarter a group of children huddled near the ruins of a temple, their eyes wide as a squad of Deathworlders passed. One child reached out, clutching a piece of bread, offering it as if it might mean something. The soldiers did not pause, did not even turn their helmets. They passed like statues carved for war, leaving the children trembling. One elder muttered to the refugees beside her, "We called for help and brought gods of fire." The words spread in whispers, half fear, half awe. In the chamber the console pulsed again. A single line burned brighter than the rest. Maintain position, judgment incomplete. And though the people of Kairos had been saved from death, they felt no safety. Only the weight of waiting for the Deathworlders to decide if their survival was a mercy or merely a pause before the end.